They promised the human warrior a pet, but all he got was a frightened alien vampire woman. Jace hated paperwork. He hated it more than plasma burns, than diplomatic dinners, than the 5 hours he once spent floating in a malfunctioning grav field while a shuttle AI recited his behavioral infractions in alphabetical order. And yet here he was, wading through forms, declarations, and one disturbingly cheerful memo titled, "Your heroism entitles you to a pet." "Who writes this dreck?" he muttered, flicking the holodoc closed. "Do they think I want a lapdog after watching half my squad get vaporized on Kelthar?" The procurement officer, a humorless gelatin of a man with eyes like unbuttered toast, blinked once. "Commander, the gift was requisitioned in accordance with Article 9B of the Galactic Allied Forces Post-Siege Morale Compensation Act. The contents have been tailored to your psychometric profile." Jace raised a brow. "My what?" "Profile," the officer repeated without blinking. "Preference indicators, historical attachments, neural spikes in response to feline media." "One cat video," Jace grumbled, "and I was concussed." The officer didn't seem to care. With an unnecessarily theatrical gesture, he activated the cryolock on a nearby stasis crate. The container hissed, mist billowing out across the floor. It made Jace's boots wet and his instincts twitch. "I swear to all the gods of junkyards, if a golden retriever jumps out of there—" The crate cracked open. It wasn't a dog. It wasn't anything Jace could have prepared for. She stumbled forward like a shadow given bones. Tall, thin, skin like soft dusk stretched over steel wiring. Her long ears twitched at every sound, delicate but sharp as antennae. Silver eyes darted too fast as if checking for ambushes no one else could see. She had fangs, dull and chipped, barely visible behind cracked lips. Her movements were hesitant, like someone half awake in a nightmare. "Commander Jace," the officer announced, "this is Sylvia, your new companion. Please sign here to confirm receipt." "I thought I was getting a pet," Jace said flatly. "She's biologically engineered for loyalty and obedience," said the officer. "She looks like she's biologically engineered to stab me in my sleep." The woman, no, the creature, whatever she was, flinched at the sound of his voice, curling in slightly, like his words hit something sore. "She's just disoriented from cryo," the officer added. "A few weeks of acclimation and behavioral calibration, and she'll be compliant." "Right," Jace said. "I'll just rub her belly and tell her she's a good girl." Sylvia made a low sound, barely audible, but unmistakably a growl. Her ears twitched. She edged behind the crate as though calculating the distance between herself and the nearest exit. The officer pushed a datapad toward Jace. "Initial here. Also, do not feed her raw meat, high-charged electronics, or anything you intend to keep." "I intend to keep my spleen," Jace muttered, signing. 3 hours later, the crate was gone, the officer was gone, and Jace was left with an alien vampire woman standing barefoot in the corner of his ship's cargo bay, staring at a wall like it owed her money. He leaned against a crate labeled "assorted ammunition," handle like you're sober, and watched her. She hadn't moved. "You speak basic?" No response. "Galactic low?" She blinked. "Standard Terran?" A pause, then softly, "Noise." "Well, that's promising." He crossed his arms. "Look, I don't know what they told you, but I didn't ask for you. I didn't ask for anyone. I wanted peace, and maybe a pet that doesn't have fangs." Her ears twitched again. Jace had the distinct feeling she understood more than she let on. He sighed. "Do you have a name?" She tilted her head, then touched her chest, barely brushing it. "Sylvia." "Right, I'm Jace. Commander. Usually. Depends who's asking." No reply. He scratched his jaw. "You hungry?" Silence. "Well, I'm eating. You can sit there and glare holes in the bulkhead if you want." 10 minutes later, Jace was halfway through a tray of something the military called chili, though he suspected it was actually leftover alien insulation in disguise. Sylvia hadn't moved. "Suit yourself," he said, mouth full. "This stuff tastes like despair seasoned with battery acid, but it's better than starving." He reached over and placed a protein bar, vanilla-flavored, allegedly, on the floor beside her. The moment he looked away, it vanished, wrapper and all. "Huh," he muttered. Baby steps. Later that night, Jace sat in the cockpit of the Dust Rat, nursing a lukewarm bottle of synth beer and watching old holo footage of his squad. Most were gone. Some retired. One guy had started a salad farm on Venus Beta. He didn't hear her come in. 1 second, he was alone. The next, Sylvia was behind him, standing silently with a look on her face like she was waiting for permission to exist. You know, he said without turning, sneaking up on me is a good way to end up learning how sharp this chair leg can get. She said nothing, but her ears drooped slightly. Not fear, not shame. Something worse. Habit. Jace sighed, set the bottle down, and reached into the weapons drawer beside the console. When he turned back to her, he held out a blade. It was small, more ceremonial than practical, but sharp and clean. She stared at it like it might explode. "No cages here," he said. She didn't take it at first, just looked at him, then the knife, then him again. Slowly, cautiously, like she was expecting the floor to drop out, she reached forward and took it. Her hands trembled. She didn't thank him, just stepped back and held it close, like it was the first thing she'd been allowed to own in years. That night, Jace woke up to find her crouched at the foot of his bunk, wide awake, silver eyes scanning the dark. "Personal space," he muttered, groggy. She didn't move. He rolled over. "Just don't stab me unless I really deserve it." A soft sound, something between a huff and a chuckle, escaped her lips. Jace smiled in the dark. Maybe this wasn't going to be so bad. The Dust Rat wasn't much to look at. It had once been a mid-range patrol vessel for the Martian Union, but that had been several wars, one rebellion, and at least 2 drunken auctioneers ago. These days, it was a patchwork of metal, duct tape, and blind optimism. The life support systems worked most of the time. The coffee dispenser growled like it was harboring a grudge, and the autopilot once tried to marry a jump gate. But Jace loved it. The ship was his flying trash can, and he was the raccoon who wouldn't leave. Sylvia, on the other hand, regarded it like it might try to eat her. She crouched in the corner of the engineering bay, studying the humming power couplings like a cat waiting for a toaster to attack. Her ears twitched at each sizzle. Jace, leaning over a console and elbow deep in wiring, kept glancing back to make sure she hadn't disassembled the reactor out of boredom. "You ever build a plasma drive?" he asked. She blinked. "Okay, stupid question. You ever touched a plasma drive?" "No," she said softly. "Well," he said, tugging out a smoking circuit, "this one has trust issues, a warped field lens, and a disturbing fondness for turning coolant into jelly. Just like my last girlfriend." Sylvia tilted her head. She had jelly. Jace paused, frowned, then shook his head. "No, she was jelly, socially. Couldn't deal with criticism, or apparently being asked to stop hacking my comms to find out who I was talking to." Sylvia's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but her fangs showed for a fraction of a second in something that might have been amusement or indigestion. Jury was still out. They spent the afternoon fixing what they could, which mostly meant Jace did all the work while Sylvia watched, mimicked, and occasionally poked things she probably shouldn't. She didn't speak much, but she was observant. Too observant. Jace caught her staring at the scar on his shoulder once, the one from the orbital strike on Kirill Station. Her gaze lingered like she could read the story carved into skin. "You do that staring thing a lot," he said. "It's unnerving." "You have too many holes," she said. He blinked. "I'm hoping you mean scars." She didn't answer. Later in the galley, if it could be called that, when it mostly consisted of a microwave and a cupboard full of emergency rations, Jace was trying to convince a vending unit to part with its last synth choco bar. It beeped menacingly. "Come on," he said, jabbing buttons. "I outranked you during the siege of Kelthar." It made a noise like a dying llama and dispensed a spoon. Sylvia approached silently, holding something in her hands. Jace jumped slightly. "Do you always move like you're trying to haunt someone?" She said nothing, just extended the object, his missing datapad, the one he'd thought he left on a supply station 3 cycles ago. She had apparently repaired the cracked screen and removed the grime from the casing. "I fixed it," she said. Jace took it, eyebrows lifting. "Huh. You know, this is dangerously close to friendship. Keep this up, and I might start asking you to watch trashy holodramas with me." She tilted her head. What is trashy? You'll know it when you see it, he said. Usually involves questionable romances and someone yelling, but he's your clone brother, at a wedding. I don't understand half the things you say, she said, sitting across from him. Half's generous. They sat in relative silence, Sylvia meticulously peeling the foil from a protein cube with a focus usually reserved for diffusing bombs. Jace took the opportunity to study her a little closer. The sharp lines of her face had softened in the past few days, like she'd finally stopped expecting him to hit her or chain her to the coolant pipes. Her ears still twitched at sudden noises, but she didn't flinch anymore when he entered a room. Progress. Hey, he said. You got anywhere you want to go? Home planet? Old battlefield? A bar that doesn't card? Her expression darkened. No home. You sure? He asked. Most people at least pretend they've got one. She looked at him, eyes unblinking. Home was where they taught us to kill, to survive. Then they sold us. Jace sat back. Ah, so childhood trauma. We're bonding. I bit a man's throat out when I was 7, she added. He whistled. Damn, I was still eating glue at 7. There was silence again, a long one. Then strangely, she let out a sound, a soft, abrupt laugh. Not graceful or melodic, more like a cough that realized it wanted to be a giggle. It caught Jace so off guard he nearly dropped his drink. There it is, he said triumphantly. Your sense of humor was just buried under trauma and fangs. Sylvia covered her mouth with one hand, clearly unsure if she was allowed to laugh. But something flickered in her eyes. Relief, maybe. A crack in the armor. That night, Jace was running system checks in the cockpit when she entered again, wordlessly. This time, she didn't just hover behind him. She sat, not too close. Just there. You can sleep, you know, he said. I mean, I think we're past the, is she going to slit my throat phase. I don't sleep, she replied. Ever? Not deeply, not since. She trailed off. Jace didn't push. He knew that tone. He'd heard it in soldiers, refugees, people with ghosts where their dreams should be. Well, you're welcome to haunt the cockpit, he said. But if you start floating or speaking in tongues, I'm throwing salt at you. What is salt? Magical rock. Wards off bad vibes and unwanted guests. Also goes great on fries. Sylvia blinked slowly. You're very strange. I prefer eccentric war hero. They sat in silence for a long while, the stars drifting past the viewport like scattered sparks in an endless dark. Eventually, Jace stood to stretch, then pointed a finger at her. You touch the weapons console and this ship will explode. That's not a threat. That's just physics. She nodded solemnly. When he returned to his bunk, she remained where she was, perched like a gargoyle on the edge of a half-broken chair, watching the stars with a haunted kind of hunger. And for the first time since Kelthar, Jace slept with his door unlocked. It was 3 cycles after the siege of Kelthar when Sylvia stretched her wings for the first time. Jace found her in the engineering bay, backlit by the dim glow of the plasma drive, her ears alert, wings folded like moths resting against a lamp. He almost tripped over a loose cable, then cleared his throat so loudly she jumped. I was going to speak quietly, he said, but apparently I have the subtlety of a detonating reactor. She hesitated, then extended one wing. It was leathery, more membrane than bone, patterned with faint bioluminescent veins that pulsed in rhythm with her breathing. Jace blinked at it, unable to remember the last time he saw something both terrifying and elegant. You have wings, he said, because he had nothing clever left. Her eyes flicked upward, then down. She bent a little, folding them slowly. Soon, soon, he echoed. She tapped the control panel with a slender fingertip, and the gently humming machine stilled, as if sensing her calm. Soon, she repeated softer. He nodded, though he had no idea what to do with this information. That afternoon, they received a comm request, a routine translation job on the rimworld of Galax 3, where 2 merchant houses argued over the price of a spice grown in fungal forests. Jace sighed. Spice wars, galactic diplomacy at its finest. Sylvia watched him pack his gear, blaster, knife, synth ration packs. She picked up his helmet, turned it in her hands. He froze. That stays, he said. You don't need this. She set it back, nodded and paused. Then, in a motion that froze Jace's breath, she brushed a strand of hair behind his ear, a human reflex, uncertain, small. She blinked at him as if she meant no harm, then dropped her hand. He swallowed hard. All right, let's go. The cruiser landed on Galax 3 under a violet sky. The air tasted acidic, like burnt citrus. Trade ships marked the horizon in silent rotation. The local spice palace was a squat terraforming dome surrounded by barrel-thick vines. Inside, merchants in layered robes haggled over fungal bundles, quoting prices in galactic credits, barter units, even ancient earth coins. Jace led the way, trying to look official. Sylvia stayed close, ears swiveling at every footstep. Every now and then, someone glanced at her and gasped, a silent stutter of recognition. Jace only nudged her once, whispering, "Don't feed anyone wrong impressions," before her mouth curved into what was almost a smirk. Negotiations dragged. One merchant accused the other of adulterating the spice with nanochemical enhancers. The other fired back, calling him a Golem Farm con artist. Jace sighed theatrically. When both sides paused, he pointed at Sylvia. "You've heard their offers?" she asked, voice low, intentionally measured to carry across the room's hush. They straightened, unnerved by her command. "She's a debt collector," Jace whispered later. "Basically, winged intimidation." It worked. Within minutes, both merchants recanted, accusing their rivals of worse crimes, and asked Jace to sort their files. He shuffled holographic transaction logs, trying to look busy while Sylvia leaned casually against a pillar, an alien shadow who needed no cage. "I don't get why they listen to you," Jace muttered. She shrugged. "Your reputation," she replied. "And I finish what you start." He paused. "That's you?" Eyes distant, she nodded. "I am mine now." They made it back aboard the dust rat just as an asteroid stray clipped the hull. The entire ship shuddered like a waking beast. Warning klaxons screamed. Jace and Sylvia were thrown from the ramp onto the corridor floor. He groaned, spat out a curse. She rolled, caught his arm. The lights flickered. The AI barked, "Hull breach in Sector 4B, initiating containment protocol." Jace stumbled upright. "Containment protocol? I said fix the hull, not quarantine." Sylvia pushed past him, racing for the damaged area. Jace followed, blaster in hand, half expecting burrowing creatures or pressure anomalies. Instead, the bulkhead had cracked, plasma coolant spritzing like glowing needles. She knelt, showing him where to place the emergency sealant. Jace pressed the glue-type compound against the leak while she held his back, shielding him from the spray with her wings halfway open. Her ears flattened, posture rigid. Then she jabbed the sealant with speed and precision that made Jace wince. Minutes later, breathing hard, they stood back. The coolant line hissed down to a slow drip. The breach patched. He looked at her. "Nice wingspan!" Her silver eyes flicked to him. She sat back on her heels, arms hugging her knees. "Thanks." He swallowed, found humor. "All right, so are you officially part of the crew now? Or just the scary, silent knife beast?" She chuckled softly, the sound echoing in the engine room. "Maybe both." He offered his hand. "Truce?" She took it, thumb brushing his calloused palm. "Truce." He grinned. "Again, you're dangerously close to friendship." Her laugh came clearer this time, genuine. "Dangerous things." As the ship hummed around them, patched and ready for the next errand, Jace felt an unfamiliar warmth, a fragile hope that whatever came next, the dust rat and its nightmare passenger might just be ready. And maybe, just maybe, this frightened alien vampire woman was no pet at all, but something decidedly better. The problem began with a chicken, not an actual chicken. Those were extinct outside of ultra-rich orbital farms. But something very close, a genetically engineered raptor bird hybrid, bred for taste, speed, and the occasional high-speed chase across cafeteria floors. The vendor at Outpost 17 had called it Poltriptor Supreme, then handed it over with a grin far too pleased for someone selling edible monsters. Jace bit into the thigh mid-flight, grimaced and stared at the meat like it had personally insulted his mother. "This tastes like ambition and failure," he muttered. Sylvia blinked across from him. "You keep eating it." "I'm trying to assert dominance," he said, chewing. "I think I'm losing." She pushed a sealed ration toward him, something dull and military gray with blocky alien script across the top. "I'm not eating something that looks like it was scraped off a drone's exhaust pipe," he said. She raised an eyebrow, gesturing to the meat. "But you'll eat that." "That," he said proudly, holding it up like a trophy, "came with a side of fear and excitement. This," he jabbed the ration, "came from an institution that thinks taste is treason." She grinned, fangs peeking slightly, then folded her legs beneath her in one fluid motion. She still wore the cloak from the Outpost Bazaar, a deep navy fabric that shimmered like oil in the light. It made her look more like an assassin priestess than a terrified ex-prisoner. Jace made a mental note to not tell her that. Last time he gave her a compliment, she asked if she needed to return the favor with a blood offering. They were halfway to the Gensai cluster on a supply run that had somehow also turned into a bounty pickup and a diplomatic message relay. Jace's job titles were piling up faster than the dust rat's unpaid parking violations. In the cockpit, the AR chirped, "Incoming hail from Vessel Vector Halo." Jace sighed. "They sound like a vape brand. Put it through." The screen crackled to life, showing a face only a mother or an unlicensed augment surgeon could love. A short, square-jawed bounty hunter named Krug. He had one eyebrow and at least 3 scars that looked self-inflicted. "Jace Arkin," Krug growled. "You got my bounty." "I do," Jace asked, glancing at Sylvia. "No," Krug said, pointing. "She's my bounty." Jace blinked. "No, no, no. She's my co-pilot." Sylvia's ears perked. "I'm what?" "Co-pilot," he whispered, then turned back to the screen. "We go way back. Fought on opposite sides during the Mintaka skirmish. Bonded over shared trauma and a love of absurdly loud ship engines." Krug squinted. "She's the desolate Fang. Empire wants her alive." "She's Sylvia now," Jace said. "And I don't sell people. Not even cranky ones with bloodied nicknames." "Then I'll take her by force." Jace sighed. "You always threaten violence before lunch?" "Lunch is violence," Krug snarled and cut the feed. Sylvia stared at Jace. "You lied. Welcome to diplomacy," he said. A proximity alert blared. Krug's ship dropped out of FTL, blasters armed. Jace ducked into the pilot seat, flipping switches. "Okay, fun's over. Time to fly." Sylvia stood beside him, wings twitching beneath her cloak. "Want me to stab something?" "Only if it gets on the ship. Or if I start screaming, 'Why are my organs outside my body?' That's your cue." The dust rat groaned under evasive maneuvers. Jace flipped the ship like a coin through an asteroid debris field, shouting apologies to every micro-moon they nearly skimmed. Krug's ship pursued, peppering their shields with fire. "I should have upgraded our defenses," Jace muttered. "You spent our credits on that self-playing saxophone," Sylvia pointed out. "It sets a mood. Not one that helps us live." They jerked left. The raptor meat flew from Jace's console, slapping onto the windshield. Sylvia gave it a solemn look. "That's what you get," she said. "Okay," Jace said, flipping the cloaking module. "New plan. I make us vanish, and you distract him." "Distract him how?" "I don't know. Make spooky alien noises. Whisper his childhood fears into the comms." Sylvia leaned forward, teeth glinting. "That I can do." Krug's sensors pinged in empty space. The dust rat vanished from sight, hovering behind a minor moon. Moments later, his comms lit up with a transmission. Static, then whispering. "Krug," came a voice distorted and low. "Remember the chicken you buried in the backyard? It still screams." "What the?" Krug snarled. "Show yourself," Sylvia purred into the mic. "You dream of drowning in feathers. Your ship smells like melted cheese." "What?" Jace wheezed with laughter, silently steering them around the moon and plotting an escape trajectory. "You snore like a defective vacuum," she continued. Krug fired wildly into the void. Jace hit the FTL jump, and with a violent lurch, the dust rat vanished into stardust. Silence returned to the cockpit. Then a slow rising chuckle. Jace grinned at her. You, he said, are a menace. And I adore it. She gave a faint smile. You talk too much. Guilty. They coasted in silence for a while, systems cooling, stars blurring around them. Then Sylvia spoke, almost too quietly to hear. Thank you. Jace glanced over. For the cloaking maneuver? Or the chicken funeral bit? For not giving me back, she said. He nodded, then grabbed the saxophone from its wall mount. Well, he said, this calls for music. Please don't, she begged. He played anyway, badly, but she didn't leave the room. Jace woke to the sound of metal screaming, not in the dramatic, poetic sense, but in the very literal, my engine is having a nervous breakdown kind of way. It echoed through the dust rat's narrow halls, accompanied by an angry alarm from the ship's AI. Critical failure in propulsion module. Recommend immediate screaming. He tumbled out of his bunk, one boot on and one mysteriously missing, and half ran, half tripped to the engine bay. Sylvia was already there, crouched like a shadowy gargoyle atop the central conduit panel, hands wrist-deep in a mess of sparking cables and glowing coolant lines. Her hair was pulled back in a haphazard knot, and her long ears flicked with agitation. I didn't touch anything, Jace said, holding up his hands like a man approaching a wild animal. You installed the sonic wine cooler next to the primary fuel regulator, she snapped. He blinked. It was on sale. You compromised the subspatial dampener for discount beverage storage. Well, when you say it like that, I sound irresponsible. She didn't reply, but a small conduit sparked at her elbow, and she hissed something in a language that made the walls shiver. Okay, Jace said, rubbing his temples. Tell me it's fixable. She hesitated. Fixable, yes, but I need a zirconium flux coil. He stared. That's rare. Unethically rare. Illegally rare. Dangerously rare, she added, deadpan. Cool, he said. So where are we going to find one of those? And don't say black market. I already owe 3 favors and a kidney to the one on Tracos 5. There is one place, she said slowly, but you won't like it. I already don't like it, and you haven't said it yet. She slid down from the panel. The Galactic Museum of Obsolete Technology. Jace blinked. We're going to steal from a museum? It's not theft, she said. It's historical reallocation. It's theft. They won't miss it. No one even visits that place. Probably because it's full of cursed toaster prototypes and vengeful holograms, he muttered. Sylvia grinned, showing just a hint of fang. And I suppose you're afraid of museums now. I'm not afraid, he said, puffing up. I just have a healthy respect for security lasers and ancient AI that calls you meatbag. The museum was on Darren Prime, a mid-tier planet with overzealous architecture and a deep love for bureaucracy. The building itself was shaped like a half-melted gear, surrounded by statues of long-forgotten inventors, each looking slightly confused by their own contributions to science. They parked the dust rat in orbit, cloaked, and took a rental pod down. It smelled like lemon cleaner and regret. Jace adjusted his collar and frowned. Remind me why I had to wear the jumpsuit. Because you're posing as a technician. And you get to be? A silent assistant with diplomatic immunity, she said sweetly. Also, my ears are too long to blend in. I could wear longer ears. You'd look like a moth. Sexy moth? Very confused moth. They walked into the museum past a robotic docent who waved too slowly and spoke like it had just learned sarcasm. The place was mostly empty, as predicted. A couple of elderly tourists, a bored school group, and a child poking a rusted cleaning bot with malicious intent. Their target was located in the subterranean vaults, naturally. Because the flux coil, as it turned out, was part of a forgotten propulsion prototype from the pre-warp era, tucked away behind 15 centimeters of plexametal and an interactive holographic tour narrated by a cheerful voice that repeated every 12 seconds. Can't we just ask nicely, Jace whispered. You want to fill out paperwork for 3 cycles and wait for planetary committee approval? He sighed. Okay, fine. Plan? She handed him a small device. Disruptor beacon. It'll knock out the nearby sensors for 20 seconds. He stared at it. This looks like a mint. It's a very angry mint. They timed it perfectly. When the tour voice reset, when the docent was mid-reboot, when the school kids were busy chasing the possessed cleaning bot, Jace pressed the beacon and slid open the panel. Inside, the flux coil gleamed like a metal pretzel made by a god with a flair for drama. "Please don't explode," he whispered and reached in. The moment he touched it, every light in the museum flickered. An alarm blared. The possessed cleaning bot screamed. A hologram of a 24th century toaster demanded tribute in 12 languages. Sylvia cursed. "Plan B?" "Run," Jace said, clutching the coil. They sprinted through the exhibits, past the hall of misguided experiments, past the talking door that judged their fashion choices, past the genetically modified corn exhibit that tried to unionize. Security drones deployed from the ceiling, small spherical bots that looked like angry soap bubbles with lasers. Sylvia kicked one midair and caught another, crushing it between her palms. "You're terrifying," Chase gasped as they vaulted over the anti-grav benches. "I've had practice," she said. They dove out a side exit just as the emergency lockdown began. Jace hit the recall on their pod, and it rocketed down like an obedient puppy. Inside, panting, bruised, and grinning, Jace held up the coil. "Tell me it's worth it." Sylvia took it carefully, inspecting it like a jeweler. "It's perfect." He slumped into the seat. "Well, that's good, because we can never show our faces on Darren Prime again." She glanced at him. "So, usual Thursday?" "Usual Thursday," he confirmed. Back on the ship, she had the engine repaired and humming like a purring dragon within an hour. Jace leaned in the doorway watching her. "You know," he said, "I thought you were going to be a quiet little creature. Sit in a corner. Maybe purr." "You thought I was a pet," she said without looking up. "I did." She looked at him, silver eyes sharp. "Do I still look like one?" He grinned. "Only if the pet comes with fangs and knows how to hotwire a museum." She smiled, actually smiled, and then tossed him a spanner. "Go tighten the plasma seals." He caught it, smirking. "Yes, ma'am." And for the first time, the dust rat felt like it had a crew. The first sign that something was wrong came when the dust rat started speaking in tongues. Not literally, but close. The ship's AI, normally a calm and sultry voice that reminded Jace of a bartender with a mysterious past, suddenly switched to a shrill dialect of Glorpax 7, an untranslatable amphibian language known for being 78% mucus-based. "Did we hit a software glitch?" Jace asked, wincing as the AI croaked a sentence that made one of the interior lights explode. Sylvia emerged from the corridor holding a spanner and a suspiciously twitching coffee dispenser. "I think the ship's having an identity crisis." "Well, who hasn't these days?" he muttered. "Can we reboot her?" "We could," Sylvia said, kneeling by the maintenance port, "or we could figure out what caused this." Jace looked at her. "Since when do we do the smart option first?" She arched a brow. "Since we started attaching emotional significance to this flying garbage scow." "I'm offended on behalf of my ship," Jace said. "She may be held together with hope and duct tape, but she's ours." "Then you should stop feeding her leftovers through the waste processor," she replied, flicking a switch. "I told you, sentient circuitry can develop cravings." Jace rubbed his face. "We gave the ship a taste for snacks." Apparently shrimp chips shorted the logic buffer. She's now convinced she's a Glorpakian worship barge. "I mean, she has carried a few strange cargoes." The lights flickered again. A metallic voice echoed from the comm system, still mucus-laced, still weirdly religious-sounding. "I think she just asked us to offer tribute," Sylvia said, tilting her head. "Or maybe a goat." "I have neither," Jace said, "but I have a slightly melted protein bar and a VHS copy of Cats from Neptune." They paused. Sylvia slowly nodded. "That might work." 5 minutes later, the dust rat accepted the offerings, quieted down, and changed the internal temperature from jungle suffering back to barely tolerable. The AI's voice returned, sultry and slightly confused. "I regret everything I said while I was possessed," it said. "No worries," Jace replied. "We've all had nights like that." He leaned back in the pilot's chair and glanced at the screen. "Okay, while we've survived possession by snack flavoring, I still haven't forgotten our next job." Sylvia sighed. "Let me guess. Another favor owed? Smuggling? Some kind of morally ambiguous delivery involving things that pulse?" I was not told they pulsed, Jace muttered. Also, no, this is different. We've been hired to pick up a diplomat. Alive? Yes. Armed? Hopefully not. Explosive? Unclear. Sylvia groaned. I miss the museum. They landed on Atraxis 9, a jungle world known for its vines, venomous birds, and aggressive souvenir vendors. The diplomat was waiting in a tiny outpost surrounded by glowing plants and humming insects. She was small, purple-skinned, and wearing at least 6 necklaces, all of which blinked in Morse code. You're late, she said immediately. I was almost offered as tribute to a carnivorous orchid. That's a thing? Jace asked. Everything is a thing here, she replied. Also, I have a cat. A small, hairless feline with cybernetic eyes slinked out of her satchel and stared at Jace like it knew how he'd die. He stepped back. Right. South, welcome aboard. Back on the ship, the diplomat introduced herself as Envoy Quimra of the Calaxian Accord. She had opinions, volume, and a fondness for fermented nut paste that smelled like despair. Within 10 minutes, she'd rearranged their cargo hold to match diplomatic feng shui and claim Jace's quarters as her own. Sylvia found him sulking in the engine bay. She kicked me out of my own bed, he muttered. She called me Batgirl, Sylvia replied. They both sat in silence. Want to fake a hull breach and drop her on a moon? Jace asked. Tempting, Sylvia admitted, but she's under political protection. Ugh, rules. They endured 3 jumps and 42 hours of monologue before Quimra finally revealed her real reason for traveling. There's an assassination plot, she said mid-chew. Calaxian Prime. I'm the decoy. Jace choked on his drink. You what now? Sylvia didn't blink. Why are you telling us this now? Because you're not stupid, Quimra replied. If I die, they'll blame you. But if I live, you'll be heroes. Jace buried his face in his hands. This was supposed to be an easy job. Transport a diplomat, maybe argue about foot massages, not get targeted by hyper-intelligent assassins with stealth tech and a grudge. You left out poison darts, Quimra said helpfully. Of course I did. The first attack came during docking procedures. A shadow flitted through the hangar. The dust rat systems went dark for 2 seconds. Sylvia grabbed Jace by the collar and slammed him behind a bulkhead as something sliced through the wall like hot butter. They stared at the glowing blade embedded beside Jace's ear. That was close, he said, voice an octave too high. No kidding, she replied. Quimra emerged from the shadows holding a cat in one hand and a pulse rifle in the other. They're here. No duh, Jace yelled. I just almost got kebabbed. The assassin, a cloaked figure with light-bending armor, materialized near the engine core. Sylvia moved like lightning, wings flaring, blade drawn from seemingly nowhere. They clashed with a hiss of plasma and speed, too fast for Jace's eyes to follow. He did what he did best, dove for the controls, flipped half the emergency systems, and prayed to whatever gods listened to space idiots. Sylvia disarmed the assassin with a twist, driving her knee into his side. The blade clattered to the floor. The cat pounced on it. Okay, Jace said, panting. We're alive. No one exploded. That's progress. Quimra tossed the cat a treat. This was only the first one. Jace groaned. Of course it was. Later, after the assassin had been duct taped to a chair and handed over to the authorities, Jace leaned on the hull exhausted. You know what I miss? He asked. Chicken? Sylvia said. Quiet, simplicity. Just me, you, and the occasional illegal artifact smuggling. She looked at him, eyes silver in the starlight. We're never going back to quiet, are we? He smiled tiredly. Not unless we crash into a black hole, she considered. I hear they're lovely this time of year. Don't tempt me. And yet, despite everything, the absurdity, the danger, the cat, Jace felt something settle in his chest, a strange, reluctant warmth. Maybe chaos wasn't such a bad co-pilot. The diplomatic gala on Calaxian Prime was held inside a hovering glass citadel shaped like an octopus, because of course it was. Political elegance, alien culture, and architectural nightmares all in one place. Jace straightened the ill-fitting formal jacket he'd borrowed from a diplomat's cousin's droid and muttered under his breath, If I survive this, I'm retiring and opening a smoothie stall on some moon without vowels in its name. Sylvia, walking beside him in a sleek black outfit that looked like it had been woven from shadow and sarcasm, smirked without turning her head. "You'd last a week." "I could do it," he whispered. "You once got lost in a hexagonal hallway for 3 hours. That hallway defied Euclidean geometry and the laws of common sense." She arched a long brow. "You asked a vending machine for directions. It spoke. It was also broken and kept offering you tentacle polish." He huffed, but didn't argue. The gala's entrance loomed, flanked by towering guards in ornamental armor, glowing with diplomatic smugness. Jace presented the forged credentials, got waved through, and promptly stepped onto a moving platform that whispered poetry about unity and planetary cooperation. He winced with every stanza. The hall inside buzzed with tension and tiny sandwiches. Representatives from 50 worlds stood sipping brightly colored liquids and saying vague threats through polite smiles. Music floated through the air, an eerie blend of harp and bone flute, and holograms danced overhead. It was a diplomatic minefield wrapped in glitter and migraine lighting. "I can't believe they trusted us with this," Jace muttered, adjusting his collar as a three-eyed ambassador tried to sniff him in passing. Sylvia scanned the room. They didn't. They ran out of options. "Ah, that explains the mildly explosive shrimp canapes." Quimra, somehow wearing even more jewelry than before, approached them with the confidence of someone who'd survived 5 assassination attempts in 2 days and now considered it cardio. The cybernetic cat curled around her shoulders like a judgmental scarf. "All right, you charming disasters," she said. "The real envoy will be here in 30 minutes. Until then, we maintain the illusion. Smile, nod. Try not to stab anyone unless they stab first." "Can we stab second?" Jace asked. "Second is negotiable." A hush fell over the room as a delegate from the Grithin Combine approached. Tall, spiny, and exuding the kind of confidence that came from knowing your homeworld had 6 sons and a long-standing tradition of throwing enemies into lava as a peace gesture. Jace bowed, slightly too far, and Sylvia had to nudge him upright with a wing. "Commander Jace Tellin," the delegate said, voice like volcanic gravel. "I heard you once destroyed a Carthan dreadnought using only an escape pod and an insult." "That's true," Jace said, "but the pod did most of the work. I just told the dreadnought its paint job looked cheap." The delegate chuckled, a sound that made several nearby diplomats reach for inhalers. "I like you." "That's concerning," Jace whispered to Sylvia as the delegate moved off. She gave him a sideways glance. "You're doing better than expected." "I'm terrified." "That's the secret to diplomacy." A sound chimed in their ears. Encrypted comms, their frequency. Quimra's voice, low and clipped. "The final assassin's here, pretending to be a caterer. Purple tray, near the ambassador from Tytha." Jace looked around. Dozens of purple trays. Could she be more specific? Sylvia was already moving, graceful and silent, eyes scanning the room like a hunter. Jace followed, muttering, "You'd think after 5 attempts they'd give up. Or get a different hobby. Knitting, maybe." They spotted him. Tall, unassuming, face too calm. The tray he carried didn't emit the standard thermal signature. Sylvia moved behind a pillar, wings folding close. Jace approached from the side, grabbing a drink from the assassin's tray with forced casualness. "Tasty," he said. "Does this come in not poisoned?" The man froze. Jace grinned, and then the lights went out. Instantly, the gala erupted into chaos. Screams, alarms, one very confused poetry platform repeating "peace and understanding" in 6 languages. Jace ducked as the assassin lunged, tray flipping into the air. Sylvia intercepted mid-strike, claws catching the blade that had been hidden inside the pastry. The fight was brief, fluid, brutal, silent. She pinned him with a knee, hissing something in that ancient tongue that made the air buzz. Security swarmed. Lights flickered back on. The guests gaped as the assassin was dragged off. Quimra, resplendent and unbothered, lifted her glass and announced, "Crisis averted. Please enjoy the rest of the evening. We recommend the pickled sunfruit." Later, when the real envoy arrived and the gala resumed, Jace stood at the edge of the crowd, finally still. The crisis had passed. Treaties were signed. Lives had been spared. And, shockingly, No one had exploded. You did good, Sylvia said, joining him. I fumbled through a dozen languages, insulted a sentient fungus, and almost got shanked by a guy disguised as dessert. Still good, he looked at her. You could have run. After all this, you're free now. She tilted her head, silver eyes reflecting the gala lights. And go where? Anywhere. Every planet we visit, you look like you could vanish into the dark and never be found again. Her lips twitched. Maybe, but I'd miss the chaos. That's my brand. She leaned closer, wing brushing his shoulder. It's growing on me. The gala ended with fireworks, actual ones for once, and the dust rat departed Calaxian Prime under the rare banner of gratitude. They sat in the cockpit, stars stretching before them. So, Jace said, feet propped on the console. What now? Sylvia tapped the nav screen. I intercepted a distress signal. Derelict station, uncharted system. Could be valuable tech. Could be a trap. He grinned. Sounds terrible. Let's go. She smirked. You're learning. And as the ship slipped into hyperspace, with a sultry AI humming softly and a cat curled on the dashboard glaring at them both, Jace realized he hadn't been given a pet or even a partner. He'd been given a reason not to fly alone. Fucking ended.